Welcome to the Nottinghamshire CAMS CBT Group for OCD, Session 1. In this session, we will be providing an introduction to the group, talking about what OCD is, what is CBT, how does anxiety maintain OCD, and setting some home tasks. You would have received a letter explaining how the group sessions will be delivered. Session videos can be watched via PC, laptop, smartphone or tablet. To get the most out of the sessions, please watch each one to the very end. And feel free to watch them as often as you like. This video will last for about 23 minutes. Afterwards, you'll be invited to join a group video chat where we will talk about applying these skills to your life and your individual circumstances. Let's have a quick quiz to start us off. How many people in the UK do you think are living with life-impacting OCD? So let's find out some more about OCD.
Despite what many people say, OCD means obsessive compulsive disorder, not obsessive cleaning disorder. Even my school friends would say, I need my school notes to be as tidy as possible because I'm so OCD. But OCD is different from a desire for things to be tidy. With OCD, there's no desire to perform the compulsion, the cleaning, the tapping, the checking of everything. We know how embarrassing and irrational our behaviour is, but we do it to protect us and those closest around us from any type of harm. It may be unusual to you, but praying 25 times a night as a child to me, in hopes that I wouldn't be sick, even though I'm not religious, seems so normal to me. But it did cause me massive distress. If I couldn't ask my dad if I was going to be sick, I went into a total meltdown. And the nature of my OCD changed as I got older. My OCD had convinced me that I was my worst fear and a moral danger to society that couldn't be trusted. And at Christmas, my dad spent the early hours into Boxing Day trying to convince me that I was a good person. And he got so defeated, he left me on the sofa and I was exhausted, retching, aching from crying so hard. And eventually we learned that no amount of reassurance could ever make my OCD go away. Looking up the courage to open up to my family and friends, tell them what I was going through, was the driving courage to help me go get therapy. Now, I make an effort to look after my mind and body, to make myself happier. I practice yoga and allow myself to feel all my feelings. Anytime I play sport, running around outside or riding bikes, my OCD is miles away. I'm in control. I own my body, movements and thoughts.
Double-checking things is a pretty common human behavior. Like, did I shut the garage door? Better double-check. How about locking the front door? Double-check. Gas stove and oven off? Double-check. We all do it, but what if you feel compelled to triple-check it, or even quadruple-check it, or quintuple-check it even? Then it might be considered an obsession. Now, what if you have to do a certain ritual with the gas stove and oven before leaving the home each time? Like, make sure the gas stove is off, wipe down the gas stove to clean it, double-check that the burners are off, make sure the oven's off, wipe down the oven to clean it, and then open the oven door to make sure no heat's coming out, and then you can leave the house. Then that might be a compulsion. Obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD, is a specific type of anxiety disorder characterized by these obsessions or compulsions. Obsessions are recurrent and intrusive thoughts that are typically unwanted and tough to get out of your brain. These unwanted thoughts, like, my house is unsafe, cause anxiety, and usually they lead to compulsions, which are actions that might be performed to try and reduce the anxiety associated with obsessions. As you might imagine, these thoughts and rituals can have a serious impact on someone's daily life. OCD affects around 3% of the population, and affects both men and women equally, and usually starts in childhood or in the teen years. Celebrities like David Beckham and Howie Mandel are known to be affected by OCD, and a more severe example is that of Howard Hughes, business tycoon and entrepreneur, among other things, who was affected by a relatively incapacitating OCD later in his life. Although obsessive-compulsive includes both obsessions and compulsions, one doesn't need both obsessions and compulsions for a diagnosis. Some individuals might have just obsessions or just compulsions, but the majority of patients have both, often where the compulsion is performed to alleviate an obsession. A very common compulsion is cleaning, which often stems from an obsession with germs or contamination. Another common compulsion is checking, usually because they have obsessions that something's unsafe, so they'll check to make sure that something's definitely safe by unlocking and relocking it, sometimes several times. More generally, though, repeating is a compulsion on its own, where an action or phrase is repeated several times, and usually this is done because if it's not, they think something bad will happen. Sometimes patients might feel compelled to order or arrange things, because when they're out of order, it causes anxiety and discomfort. Finally, mental rituals are also obsessions. These are often done to try to neutralize intrusive or what they think are bad thoughts. So they might try and call up specific words or phrases they think are good thoughts to try and replace the bad thoughts. Now, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, the 5th edition, or the DSM-5, gives specific diagnostic criteria to meet for a diagnosis of OCD. First and foremost, they need to have the presence of obsessions, compulsions, or both. Makes sense. The obsessions and/or compulsions need to also be time-consuming, often such that it produces distress with their social life and their work. For example, taking 2 hours every day folding and unfolding clothes and then being late for work. It's also important that the obsessions and compulsions are not due to the physiological effects of a substance or other medical condition. Finally, the apparent anxiety isn't better explained by another mental disorder, like for example an obsession with personal appearance, like in dysmorphic disorder. Like most mental disorders, there isn't a known cause of OCD, though it's thought to be a combination of genetic and environmental factors. Sometimes OCD seems to run in families, and an important clue is that identical twins are more often affected than non-identical twins. It's now thought that abnormalities in serotonin neurotransmission in the brain plays a key role, though the exact mechanism is unknown. Treatment usually involves psychotherapy, medications, or both. Among psychotherapy options, cognitive behavior therapy has been effective, specifically a technique called exposure and response therapy, where patients are first exposed to the anxiety and compulsion-provoking situation, ultimately showing that the anxiety actually lessens when the compulsion is not carried out. Because the cause has been linked to serotonin, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs, have been shown to be an effective drug treatment, though they often come with symptoms and side effects that may need further treatment with medications or psychotherapy. With the right treatment, though, patients often return to normal daily life and activities.
So what does your OCD look like? Can you give it a name? Can you draw it or describe it? What sort of things does the OCD bully you into doing? What obsessions and compulsions do you have? Did you know that research suggests that 80% of people have intrusive or unwanted thoughts, images, or urges? Here are just some examples. The difference between people that have OCD and people that don't isn't whether or not they have the intrusions, it's what they believe about them. People with OCD believe that the intrusions are so important that they need to be acted on. We know that OCD is really awful, but we also know that it's possible to recover. The best treatment for OCD is something called cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT for short. This is a diagram to show how the 5 areas of CBT are all linked together to create a vicious cycle. Let's look at an example of how OCD can bully you into a vicious cycle of thinking and doing. In this situation, I have an intrusive image of me stabbing my little sister. This leads me to experience intense emotions of distress and fear. Because I feel this way, I get lots of changes in my body, such as my heart pounding, I feel hot, I feel sweaty, I feel sick and nauseous, and my breathing starts getting really fast. I respond to this by counting all the knives in the house repeatedly. I avoid going to the kitchen. I avoid being alone with my sister. And I repeatedly say in my head, "Stay safe, stay safe." So you see, OCD keeps you trapped by making you feel really anxious, and that something bad is going to happen if you don't do what it wants. So it's really important that we understand anxiety so that we can beat OCD.
You know what anxiety feels like. We all do. Everyone experiences anxiety in some way or another. It's something that connects all of us together. Why we feel anxiety and what it really is, that may surprise you. Without anxiety, we'd all be in serious trouble. As soon as your brain senses you're in danger, a little piece of it, called the amygdala, kicks in. It gets your body ready to react. That could mean fight, run away, or shut down. It's called the fight, flight, or freeze response. This reaction goes back millions of years to our distant animal ancestors. Animals whose amygdalae were more sensitive to danger were more likely to stay alive and off the menu. Over millions of generations, this developed into the system we all know as anxiety. So you see, anxiety itself is not all bad. But when there's no immediate life or death threat, and your amygdala keeps telling your body that you're in danger, that's when anxiety becomes a problem. Your amygdala doesn't know the difference between getting eaten and public speaking or failing a test. Human society has only existed for a relatively short time. It's messy and complicated and confusing, and our amygdalae just haven't had time to catch up. So sometimes, when we're in uncomfortable situations, our brains misread the risk and overreact. Our hearts beat faster and we breathe heavily, pulling more oxygen into our bodies. The muscles in our arms and legs tense up and fill with blood. Our skin perspires to cool us down. This would all be great if we needed to fight or run, but instead, we just feel tense and sweaty. Sometimes our minds go blank and we feel like we can't move or talk. That would be great if we needed to hide. Instead, we just feel stuck. When things trigger our anxiety, sometimes we try to avoid them, like our ancestors avoiding a predator. But that can cause problems when those triggers are important parts of life, like going to school or meeting new people, things that won't just give up and go away. So how does knowing all this help? Well, it starts with remembering what's really going on. There's nothing physically wrong with you. It's just your amygdala trying to tell you it thinks you're in danger, even if it gets confused about how much danger you're really in. Understanding why we feel anxiety is an important step in learning to manage it.
So, paying attention to intrusive thoughts, images, and urges triggers our anxiety and that fight and flight response. But we know that this is not dangerous. We will teach you techniques about how to manage this anxiety in the group. The quickest way to beat OCD is to make sure that you don't just rely on the time that we share together in the group. The hard work happens at home in between sessions by doing the tasks that we set out together in the group. Through dedication and lots of practicing your newly learned skills as often as you can, you can become your own therapist when our time together in the group ends. We will call this home practice. The home tasks for this week are to write down all the obsessions and compulsions that OCD bullies you into doing. How do you want to refer to your OCD bully? Give it a name or try drawing it. Don't forget to write down any questions that you might have for us. Thank you for listening. See you in the group discussion.